Healthcare is too expensive. Employers are offsetting costs onto their employees. Who will make health benefits affordable for hard-working Americans and their families?
You will! This is the Empowering Plans Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you once again emphasize the benefits in your benefit plan. Now prepare to learn,
Plan,
save,
and protect with the FIA Group.
Welcome, everyone, to the Empowering Plans Podcast. It is a new year, but it is your same host from the last podcast, Corey Crigger. Today, however, I am joined by the impeccable Ron Peck. Say hi, Ron.
Hi, Ron. That was very clever, Corey. Well done.
I'm sure that's only the 30th or 40th time you have ever heard that pun in your life. And that's probably on the underside.
Yeah, I was going to say once a year does it. I got it out of the way early. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, it is a brand new year. We got that out of the way in the new year. Ron, I don't think you and I have had a chance to chat since the calendar turned over. How's the new year been treating you so far?
You know what? It's funny. Today we were recording an enrollment meeting for our plan members regarding our health benefit plan, some of the innovative things that we're doing for 2025. And before we started, one of my colleagues here wished me a happy birthday and reminded me that my birthday is in 2 days. And honestly, I totally forgot. January 17th, that's going to be my birthday. And Corey, I had no idea it was sneaking up on me. That's pretty much in a nutshell what it's been so far. I swear, I blinked and 2 weeks have already gone by.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, happy early birthday to you, Ron. We are still digging out in Louisville, Kentucky from the snow event a couple days ago. Louisville not equipped to handle 10 inches of snow. And my life has been consumed with HOA drama because my neighbors are in an uproar about what we're paying for snow removal when I still have, half an inch of ice on the road that leads out of my house. So fun stuff to start the new year, I could say.
You're complaining to a guy who spent the last quarter century living in New England, right? I think it's funny. If somebody were to ask which FIA office, Louisville or Boston, is going to be locked in snow, I don't think most people would have wagered that it was going to be Louisville. So nice job surprising me. If this is what we're due for this year, I can't wait to see what other surprises we're going to see.
Well, you know what, Ron? Even a grain of sand can bring a super processor to a halt. And that's how I feel what happens in this office. We're just so high performing. The smallest inconvenience can just throw the whole work off. But I digress, and that'll be the end of that. Ron, we were batting around some topics for this first podcast of the new year, and I'm really excited about what we have in store for the fans today. I'm sure there are some fans out there and listeners to the Empowering Plans podcast that are also sports fans, right? And we are right in the midst of a great time to be a sports fan. You have the NFL playoffs underway. Ron wouldn't know anything about that in New England, at least not this year. You have the college football championship. My Kentucky Wildcats are playing some great basketball. We're heading towards March. And the best part about good times in the sports calendar, Ron, is sports talk radio. And I don't know, Ron, I think you were coming up in the heyday and the early years of WFAN out there on Long Island. Mike and the Mad Dog, pioneers of sports talk radio. It's just always great when two gas bags just get on the air and they absolutely let loose. And this time of the year, we're recording this on the 15th. It's just, you're either the greatest or you're a bum. The Minnesota Vikings win 14 games and they lose to the Rams, and they're the worst team in the NFL, and they couldn't even get one playoff win. You just get this whole gambit of marginally informed opinions from talking heads all across the country. And so what Ron and I thought would be a great idea is, since we're on the eve of a new administration, since we're starting off a year, is if we gave some flaming hot takes in the healthcare industry for 2025. And now listen, I'm going to caveat this a little bit, Ron. I think we have to do that as attorneys, right? There's going to be some speculation here. But with all things FIA, it's not reckless, it's informed speculation, and I think we have a pretty good podcast in store for everyone. Does that sound pretty good, Ron?
Corey, you can't spell spectacular without speculation, and we have got some spectacular forecasts for the listeners. I can't believe you're conjuring up 660 The Fan getting me riled up, bringing up my New York roots. I am amped to go. I am ready to throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And I can't wait to come back to this a year from today and see where we completely fell flat on our faces and misguided everybody.
Well, you know what, Ron? The blind leadeth the blind, and we're both going to fall in the ditch. Let me fire off my first hot take to you. We'll get your response. We'll go back and forth a little bit, and then we'll let the people get back on their way. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So my first flaming hot take of 2025, RFK Jr. will be confirmed, and before the end of 2025, he will ban at least 2 of the top 10 most popular junk/snack foods in America. Now, Ron, I pulled up an infographic of America, and I saw what the most popular snack food was in my state of Kentucky, according to Google, so I know that it is correct. Would you like to guess what the most popular snack food in the state of Kentucky?
In Kentucky? What goes well with a bourbon? Let me think now. Is it some type of nacho chip, maybe Doritos?
Ron, you are a clairvoyant. It is, in fact, Doritos, as it is with most of the South. And actually, I think Dorito is the one that is most likely to get a ban based solely on the fact that it is loaded up with one of RFK's least favorite additives, Red 40. So now, for a little bit of informed speculation here, RFK, of course, make America healthy again. That's his big slogan. That's what he's been pushing. I do think that there is some validity to that claim. I think that people in general do not take what they ingest into their body. I don't think we think about it a lot, right? I don't think we make the most informed decisions when we are fueling our bodies. I think a lot of times, especially when you're snacking, that you're just mindlessly going to whatever tastes good, whatever makes you feel good. And a lot of times, those are the things that are the worst for you. And RFK, he has very famously pointed out there was actually kind of a New York Times faux pas, one could say, that where he pointed out the ingredients list in Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops manufactured in America versus Fruit Loops manufactured in Canada. And the number of ingredients and the types of ingredients vary wildly. In Canada, they use dyes that are organic, that are derived from fruits and vegetables to dye their Fruit Loops. Here in America, you get the neon pop when you look at a box of Fruit Loops, and that's because they're infused with yellow 5, red 40, all those big hot button issues. And I will say, there are some data out there that links red 40 to some hyperactivity that leads to, especially in children, that removing red 40 from diets can help some of the symptoms that are misdiagnosed or diagnosed as ADHD. So I believe Doritos will be one. And then let's just throw out my favorite snack. That way, no one can accuse me of being personal. My favorite snack of all time is a double stuffed Oreo. Doritos and Oreos chopping block under RFK because we're going to make America healthy again. We're either going to have to get a new formula or where they're going to be outright gone from the shelves. Ron, what do you think of my first hot take of 2025?
I think you are swinging for the fences, and unfortunately, I think you are striking out. No, I'm only being facetious. Corey, I think you're onto something. Well, first of all, I'm still riding the high on getting Doritos right. Let me get that first out of the way. Second, I was driving into work this morning and I was listening to, you got it, local sports talk radio. I don't know how you knew. And they were talking about how in Massachusetts, and particularly in Boston and the Boston metro area, there is a proposal to increase taxes on soda pop, soft drinks, and it's this health tax. So I think that not only RFK, but even at the local and state levels, you're starting to see this major push to, if not ban entirely, at least phase out these products. And it's interesting because the last time I saw something like this was with tobacco and tobacco products, where they implement all these taxes and increase prices in order to phase it out in this anti-smoking campaign. And I think that junk food is like the new tobacco. Between the conversations, the talk you hear about it being addictive, the impact on health. So if I use tobacco and tobacco products as sort of an example of how it was done, it took place, but it was a much slower roll. So while I think you are spot on and correct about where we're headed, I think it's going to be sort of this slow transition. And I think instead of targeting any particular product, because if I'm the attorney for, I guess, what, Frito-Lay or whoever it is that's producing Doritos, I'm going to do the classic age-old legal argument of, that's not fair. You didn't do it to them. Classic. My 9-year-old rolls that one out every time we're in family court. But anyway, I do think that what we will see are rules and regulations implemented to phase out junk food that does not adjust or change how it's produced. You brought up the Canadian Fruit Loops, and it's interesting because I heard about that one a lot, but it is a good example. You look at food in Europe, a lot of grocery stores will actually carry food imported from Europe, obviously more expensive to go that route, and you compare the ingredients. I think that if you're Frito-Lay, your Doritos, your Oreo, they've got two options, which is either to get booted or to change how it's produced. And I got to tell you, as your friend and colleague, I'm hoping that they'll actually find a way to adjust to avoid the penalties, because I know Corey without Oreos is a grumpy boy. So we need you in top performing status there, buddy. So I think that you're right in that there's going to be major changes. I think it's going to be a slower roll, and I think instead of being banned, it's just going to result in a change, and hopefully you still like the flavor.
Fair enough. Canadian Fruit Loop, shout out Jason Davis. Also, best way to dunk an Oreo, fork into the icing, into the milk. No mess, efficient. So that was my first hot take. Ron, let's hear what you got.
So, I was thinking about some of the things that we're tracking here at the FIA group, and I was asking myself, could I see a trickle down, sort of a ripple effect from any of these trends? And one of the cases, the lawsuits that we're following, is this Wesco versus Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan case. Now, in a nutshell, for those who aren't aware of this lawsuit, basically what's happening is you've got this self-funded plan administrator, they've got this plan, and they're using Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan as their ASO. For those who don't know, that's when a large insurance carrier is providing third-party administrative services. They're acting as a TPA, it's this ASO, right? So Blue Cross Blue Shield is their TPA, processing claims on behalf of the self-funded plan, and as part of the arrangement, this plan is required to use a stop-loss carrier that is designated and selected by the TPA, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. And you might not be surprised to hear that the stop-loss carrier they are required, I'm doing air quotes, and I'll tell you why in a second, to use is the Blue Cross Blue Shield stop-loss. So there's this self-serving sort of incest where, one hand feeds the other. Now, I did the air quotes when I say required because this plan and others using this ASO TPA, they're not required to use this carrier. They could select another stop-loss insurance carrier for their reinsurance needs. But if it's not on the preferred list, they have to pay a penalty. There's an additional administrative fee. And so this lawsuit is basically saying that this is a penalty that is invalid, it's anti-competitive, and that it's this self-serving, fraudulent behavior on the part of Blue Cross Blue Shield. So why do I bring this up when we're talking about hot takes for 2025? Well, set aside what this lawsuit is about specifically and look more generally what it tells you. What it tells you is that self-funded plan administrators, associations, unions, employers, groups of employees, right? They are more focused and involved in how their plan is being administered and how their funds are being spent than ever before. In this instance, they're looking at a fee that's being paid to utilize an alternative stop-loss carrier. This has been going on for decades. Why now? In the past, it was just taken for granted. It is what it is. But now, every dollar being spent by the plan is being examined. Every single expense is being questioned. What's next? My hot take, Corey, in 2025, we are going to see an never-before-seen influx of lawsuits filed by plan members, plan administrators, employers, against third-party administrators, against employees suing their own employer, the employer then turning around, suing the TPA, everyone pointing fingers at each other about waste, about misuse of plan assets, about paying excessive charges to providers, the things that we've always looked at the past and said, can you really justify this hospital's bill? 500%, 700%, 1,000% what Medicare pays. Yeah, you're getting a 50% discount, a 60% discount but you're still paying 400, 500, 600% what Medicare is paying. If the people who are funding that plan knew what you're paying at a hospital for an aspirin, for a Tylenol, for a Band-Aid, would they argue you're misusing and abusing the plan assets, and would they come after you for breach of fiduciary duty? We've said that that's a potential risk for decades, and I think this lawsuit is an example where you're starting to see that this could be a real threat.
Ron, I think that's a great one. And if I were to rank, not to give away the ending, but if I were to rank which of these hot takes are most likely to come to fruition, I think that this one is probably going to be the most accurate one that we have, right? We've seen the slow build up to Wesco. We saw multiple fiduciary lawsuits coming kind of down the pike in prior years with Johnson & Johnson and some other cases that came forward. And there is just a attitude of being fed up with mismanagement of plans funds. And I think this dog will hunt, as my grandfather used to tell me. I really would like to come in here and poke a hole in this and tell you how wrong you are and how it's just going to be the status quo. And I guess if I were to play devil's advocate of my own position here, it would be that, it's a timely endeavor to bring lawsuits, that the status quo usually wins out, and that although people get riled up with cases every now and then, that it's very hard to actually galvanize an entire industry in so much that you see multiple lawsuits coming forward over the same topic over and over and over again. So if I were to disagree with you, I would say, yeah, you're factually correct, but ultimately at the end of the day, people are going to keep doing what people do because we're a species of habits, and we are in the habit of outsourcing, quote unquote, our healthcare, and that's just the habit that we're going to maintain, right? Employers are going to keep paying large fees. They're going to keep getting nickel and dimed or quartered in some instances when you're talking about some of this healthcare spend. And although we would like to see it, and like you said, we've been sounding the alarm on this for years about mismanagement and fiduciary responsibility, I'm afraid the status quo may end up winning out in the end. And this is just another blip on the radar that will fade into our memories as we continue doing the same thing over and over, the same way we've done it for decades, and then we still complain that the industry is broken and no one's trying to fix it, which is incorrect.
Corey, tied to that, and it's an important point, and I do want to make sure I make one thing absolutely clear. I am in no way suggesting that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan is guilty of the things of which they're being accused by Wesco. And I'm not saying that Wesco is necessarily has the right of this, and we're going to have to see how it plays out in the courts. It's really, I think, for us more about the awareness about the threat. And, to your point, I think that at least some of the status quo, some of the things that it's always been done this way, a lot of entities in the industry, we do it that way because it's always been done that way, but we forget why, right? And I think these lawsuits are going to end up requiring us to look back and ask the question, why do we do it that way? And it may be there's a good reason. It may be that it's a defensible action. In fact, we've written a number of blog posts and articles about this particular lawsuit, and in it, we do present arguments in favor of the fee. We explain that not all stop loss carriers are the same, and that, sometimes there's the administrative cost, there's the threat of the carrier being a little bit too loose when it comes to denials, that there's a system efficiencies in place to reduce costs with these preferred carriers. There's a lot of reasons to use these preferred carriers, and it does create additional costs not to, and so it has to be charged a fee. So there are arguments on both sides for sure. I think that, to your point, win, lose, or draw, everyone in the industry needs to be prepared to defend their actions, to explain why they do things the way they do. If it's costing the plan money and you can't justify it, that's, I think, where the threat lies. So just be prepared to show your work. That's kind of what it boils down to, I think.
Great caveat, but like all sports talk radio, Ron, there's no room for caveat. There's no room for nuance. So moving right along.
Absolutes. Tell us what your next hot take is, Mr. Corey.
I have a two-parter, Ron, to finish my section up here, and it's going to be a doozy, let me tell you. So we're on the eve of the new Trump administration. One of the hallmarks of the first Trump administration was the passing of the No Surprise Act, which banned balance billing in certain subset of cases and also formalized a process for dispute of payments between providers and health plans. My take, Trump 2.0, tapping into the American zeitgeist right now that the middle class is being overburdened financially, expands the NSA to prohibit balance billing on all out-of-network bills regardless of service type, and also provides a robust and efficient appeal system to IDR entities. Now, this is a lot of wishful thinking on my end, because as someone who has dealt with a lot of NSA cases and seen a lot of IDR determinations, let me tell you, it's in need of some type of appeal process, in my personal opinion. We have seen far too many claims come back with IDR awards for overbilled charges. Billed charges be $20,000, and all of a sudden we get an IDR award for $27,000. And, by the letter of the law, you cannot take billed charges into consideration. Now, I think we could argue congressional intent over that was so that you just didn't defer to the billed charges of having some type of weight. But unfortunately, providers are using this language to submit offers to the IDR entity that are over what they're billing for. They're getting paid more than what they would bill these services for. I think that is a ripe area that needs to be shored up, needs to be corrected. And I think we need some type of process where we can air grievances for IDR determinations that are unconscionable, right? We've got IDR determinations via handles NSA claims for some clients. When IDR determinations are in favor of the provider, we have asked for the opposition supporting evidence. And when we get and review it, it's just hundreds of pages of medical records. It has nothing to do with cost of service. It has nothing to do with what treatment took place. It seems like a lot of these determinations are, well, this person was sick and we have doctors on staff, so we should be paid. We don't believe that that's what the NSA was created to do. We believe that a good faith interpretation of the NSA is service was rendered, bring both parties to the table. What is the objective best price that could be paid for this service, the most reasonable price for this service? And both parties should come in with good faith evidence supporting their assertion that, for this emergency CT scan, we believe that $2,000 is the best reimbursement based on what the average cost of the service is, not just the fact, well, this person had a broken leg and we had to have the image read, so we think it should be $8,000. That's just not enough supporting evidence. So look for, in 2025, the No Surprise Act eligibility to be expanded. Look for an appeal process and a sharpening of the NSA language to help inhibit some of these egregious IDR decisions that we have seen. How about that one? Better than RFK?
Good. I love it. I love it. And it's one of those things where sometimes things have to change because they can't continue the way they're going. And with the No Surprises Act, I think to your point, the fundamental, sort of the foundational reason why it exists is a good one. And there's public support, there's support on both sides of the aisle, right, as they say. So to say, oh, they're just going to eliminate it and go back to the way it was, you can't go back when there's this level of support for the justification. But the actual execution is lacking. And for all the reasons you've seen, I mean, Corey, you mentioned before using a fork to dip the Oreo in the milk. And I think the reason you do that is because your hands are so filthy with all the appeals and the NSA work you've done. You don't want to get them in your milk. It'll sully the drink. I know you and the team here, the provider relations team at have seen so much NSA work. You could probably write up a blueprint, ways to improve the NSA. So if you've seen it, I know others have seen it as well. It is a priority. It needs to be done, updating and improving the NSA process. And to your sort of part A of your two-part prediction, if entities are going to go through the effort of pouring in additional resources and improvements into the process, why not leverage it and take advantage of those improvements by expanding the scope that applies? So to your point about sort of expanding the types of claims that can come under it. So step one, improve the infrastructure. Step two, increase the traffic. And you do that by expanding the scope, the types of claims, of appeals that can come under the NSA. I don't know if it'll be all at once or if they'll continue to sort of tack on new types, but right on. I think that this is going to be a major area of change because it affects everybody, the payer, the payee, and the patient. So I think you're right on with this one. And if you're involved at all in the health benefits industry, you better work with somebody who understands the NSA and is literate when it comes to the NSA, because it's only going to get even more complicated. So if you're first getting on board now, it's too late. That ship has sailed. So you better find somebody who's got their sea legs under them already and knows what they're doing, because things are going to get more complicated, not less.
Absolutely.
That was
The
a little
best
bit of
time to
a
plant.
little shout out for you there, Corey.
Yeah, no problem. And Ron, you're absolutely right. The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. So find a partner that's aligned, that knows this space and knows what to do. Ron, bring us on home with your last hot take for 2025.
Well, you know what? I didn't really have a hot take, so what I did is I hopped on the internet and I asked Gemini for some hot takes, and then I asked ChatGPT. And as I cycled through them, they all came back and said the same thing. It said AI will take over healthcare in America. No, I'm just kidding. I'm conjuring up images of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, right? But in all seriousness, we're already seeing in 2024 an increased usage of AI, artificial intelligence, in the healthcare space. And where we first sort of saw it coming up in the media was reports on how providers are using AI for diagnosis, not as the only source of diagnosis, but as an added tool. Providers using it to help supplement their own experience and knowledge to determine the disease or injury, to diagnose the issue, and to come up with a treatment plan. And to that point, also AI being used in coming up with treatment plans. But again, it's as a supplement to the human provider, not a replacement. I believe we will continue to see an expanded use of AI, not only on the provider side, but also on the payer side. You may even see it on the patient side. It's going to be, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, that as people continue to sort of supplement their web searches with artificial intelligence, asking, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? If I'm going to ask AI how to bake a cake, it's not that big a leap to also ask AI, hey, where should I go to get my appendix removed, right? Why does my tummy hurt and where should I go? So AI is going to play a role in all three P's of the healthcare system: the patient, the provider, and the payer. As it relates to the provider, those of us in the health benefits industry, we're going to need to ask ourselves, how are we going to adjust the way we process and pay claims when AI is involved? There are diagnosis codes for everything. We were joking the other day that if a person is trampled by a moose, there's a code for that, right? So if there's a code for being trampled by a moose, then is there a code for diagnosis performed by an AI, right? I think that as artificial intelligence becomes more and more involved in various aspects of healthcare, and in particular the provision of healthcare on the provider side, those in the payer market are going to have to ask themselves, are we making adjustments or changes to how we process and pay claims when AI was involved in the delivery of healthcare? Or for the time being, are we just going to treat it as if it were a human being that had done it, instead the way it always had been done in the past? And if I know what I know and I know what I know, there will be changes, because I guarantee somebody is going to argue, why should I pay as much to have a computer diagnose a condition in 5 minutes when I used to pay that much to a human to diagnose that condition in 5 hours, right? So I just think that not only the use of AI in healthcare, but how other entities respond to that use is going to be huge in 2025. Corey, what does your true intelligence, your natural organic intelligence, have to say about that hot take?
I think that's another great one, Ron. You know, Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast this week, and he talked about how in Meta, that very soon they are going to have a mid-level software engineer that is their created AI software engineer, and that in a very near future that mid-level AI software engineer will be in charge of creating and programming its future AI. So the AI will enhance the AI, and then that's when we get to Terminator 2 Judgment Day, right? That's when we really need to watch out for Skynet. But that's for a different podcast. That's the Thea Tinfoil podcast. We could talk about that later. We're already seeing it a lot. You're already interacting with more AI than you ever know. You're logging into LinkedIn and you're getting a chat message. You're seeing emails that are getting more and more form baked because of the Windows enhancements and the Microsoft enhancements. You would be silly to not think that AI is not going to touch every single aspect of every single industry in the country. And the question is going to be, for you out there, listeners to the Empowering Plans podcast, are you ready for it? Are you going to be able to take advantage of it? Are you going to be able to find the efficiencies, leave out the inefficiencies? And are you going to be able to create a product and be able to support your clients the way that we want to support you. So I think you would have to have your head in your sand to not think that AI is going to be dominating this space very soon, Ron. So I think that's a great, great hot take.
Well, I appreciate the positive feedback, Corey. I don't know about you, but I am drained. All of this thinking has got my very small, very natural, organic brain completely empty. I feel wrung out. I tell you what, I think it's time to wrap up this podcast, let people go noodle on what we had to say, and I'm going to go get myself a bottle of soda pop, a sleeve of Oreos, and a bag of Doritos. What do you think?
Make Ron Peck healthy again. Go for it.
You know what? Honestly, I've been hearing that my whole life. Hasn't stuck. Listen, Corey, on behalf of myself, Pat the Man Santos, the incredible podcast producer, everybody here at the FIA Group, and frankly, everybody in the industry, everyone who's listening in, thank you so much for joining us. To the audience, Corey, thank you for your thoughtful input and frankly, all the work you've been doing on the media front. I know you've been popping up on a lot of blogs and podcasts lately. And unlike most people, you've always got something fresh to say. So it's incredible and a privilege to work with you. And listen, to everybody who's joined us, we've been producing these podcasts for quite some time. I hope you're getting as much listening as we are getting doing them. So thanks again for joining the FIA Group for an Empowering Plans podcast.